Neither of you have touched on the subject of the so-called same-sex marriage. And I believe that Mr. Addabbo was part of the legislature that approved that. So I would like to hear from both of you on that subject.
I think I touched base on it a little bit earlier when I first spoke, but I'll reiterate because I don't want to take time away from Joe. As far as my opinion on same-sex marriage goes, had I been your state senator at the time, I would have voted against it. I would have voted against it because, again, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I believe that marriage between a man and a woman in the Catholic Church is our faith. It's what we believe in. It's what we were taught. Thou shalt not covet another man's wife. Think about that. Doesn't say otherwise. In addition to that, what do the children in that situation endure? The adopted children, or the children that come into that situation where there are two parents that are of the same sex. What are the psychological consequences to those kids when they come and they have friends over and they say, "Where's your mom?" "Oh, there's my mom." "No, that's your dad." "Where's your dad?" "That's my dad too." You know, it's not a joke. It's a fact. The psychological ramifications of the children of same-sex marriage are steep. And the fact of the matter is this. Again, as I said earlier, I, or anyone in this room, I can't tell somebody who they can care about. That's not the point. The point is this. In the Catholic Church, in religious faith, marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's what I believe, and that's what I'll believe till the day I die.
That's it. Amen.
One of the hardest votes I had to take, no question, and you get to pick and choose, you get to do the hard votes and the easy votes. And that was one of my hardest. I got criticized for trying to listen to my people in my district. Then again, like I mentioned earlier, I am their voice. And again, I mentioned also that it's their principles even before my own sometimes. But my principle is about listening and then leading. And we went around the district, and I thought that in my district, we had the documentation, we took surveys and everything else. But in the end, it wasn't about the surveys in my district. I voted yes. But the bill's been around, what, 2 years now?
3 years.
3 years? Ish, right? 3 years, 2 years? Okay. Really, our lives haven't changed. My perception of a man, marriage is still man and woman. In the eyes of the state, it's a little different, for tax purposes only. We made changes to the bill. The initial bill was very strict, quite broad. But of course, Bishop DiMarzio spoke out, and many of us in the Senate spoke out. We sort of structured it a little differently to protect the church and the church roles. But we see that 2 or 3 years later, really life hasn't changed much for us. But it made life a little easier, a little better for those who are of a gay marriage. I'll respectfully disagree a little bit with Mike. There are no children of a gay marriage. They're fine. They're not emotionally disturbed. They're okay. I'm not going to say every one of them, but we have kids in heterosexual families that need help too. In the end, I always thought that, you know, when it said love thy neighbor, it was unconditional love. It wasn't about love only straight people. It was love regardless of a person that God created.
I love my dog, but should I marry him?
No.
What about
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Wait. So I don't know if my explanation is going to make anyone feel better, except that we see that it really hasn't changed. The earth still spins. But for me, to be honest with you, I don't know.
Wait. I'll recognize the questions, please.
Yeah, I'm finishing. I don't know if this was your issue and it's a high priority for you, then I understand totally. But when I went out and looked at and spoke to people in my district, at my church, in senior centers, those online, at the job fair, this wasn't their issue. For the vast majority of my people, it was about health care. It was about finding a job. It was about poor transportation as they went to school. It was about helping a veteran. It was about helping those who make ends meet and help the middle class and help those who have a family. Those were the issues that were important to them, not gay marriage. So if it's an issue for you, I respect that, But for the vast, vast majority of my people in my district, vast majority, there are other much more important issues than that. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions out there yet?
Yeah.
Wait, who did not ask a question? This gentleman over here.
Yeah, Mike, earlier you spoke about fracking in your intro, but we didn't get to hear from Joe about fracking.
Ethan dionyl peroxide hydroxide. Do you want that in your water? Very simple. We only need to look at the border across in Pennsylvania to see the dangers of fracking. I'm against fracking. I always have been. I'll tell you why. Once you contaminate our water, there is no going back. You cannot uncontaminate water. The fracking that would take place in the Marcellus Shale that stretches throughout our state is within miles of our water supply upstate. And our water supply is not very well protected. Once those mixture of chemicals, peroxide, formaldehyde, other acids, roughly a chemical mixture of over 50 chemicals get mixed into our soil, it travels. Once it hits our water stream, you cannot go back. Hydrofracking does not increase jobs. It does not increase jobs. The oil companies bring their own workers because it's a highly technical procedure. So maybe a couple of the restaurants may gap for a short while, but even if it does bring a couple of jobs, I cannot jeopardize our water, our most precious water that we rely on, our families rely on, our businesses rely on. Now there is another way of extracting the Marcellus Shale natural gas. There is. I'm all for drilling or extracting the natural gas. There is other ways. There's a gel that's less liquid. There's other procedures. The problem is, these other procedures are more expensive for the oil companies. And they don't want to spend the extra dollars, but they'll be quick enough to use hydrofracking. So, for drilling purposes, let's drill, let's be less dependent on foreign land, but let's keep in mind, any natural gas that we get out of our soil, there's no guarantee we don't give it to the foreign land. It doesn't make us less dependent or more independent. So the idea here is on multi-levels. On the biggest environmental issue of our time, I'm against fracking. Thank you.
All right, for those, yeah.
I know I spoke on fracking earlier. The only thing I want to say is with respect to the contaminants, there's one thing I just want to educate some people on. Fracking goes thousands of feet down into the earth. The water is hundreds of feet up from the earth. And nowadays there are ways of recycling the water that's used. Now, there are also ways with respect to the jobs that you can put a proposal in to make sure that if we have hydrofracking upstate, we can put a proposal in to see if we could allow our people to get those jobs before the oil companies put their jobs in. And if they don't want to do that, then they can't work in our state. But there are ways around these things. You know, everybody has it, well, you know, they're only going to hire their people. There are ways around issues to make things happen. But as far as, you know, using Pennsylvania as an example, they did a site on 200 different sites in Pennsylvania. And guess what, folks? The one site that had contaminants in the water was contaminated before they did any fracking on the site. So to automatically assume that it's going to contaminate the water is not a fact, because Pennsylvania is proving us wrong every day on that.
Correct.
All right, let's see. Yeah, we're going to have to conclude pretty soon. Okay, somebody else who did? Yes, gentleman right here.
We heard about your biography earlier. Can you give us your biography briefly?
Oh, sure.
Your background?
It was a stormy night on May 13, 1964. Nativity Parish, Ozone Park, Archbishop Malloy High School, St. John's University, Truro Law School. Was an attorney for 10 years. When I became a city council member in 2002, I decided to remove myself from the practice of law because I wanted to be a full-time public servant. I am still a full-time public servant, no longer a practicing attorney. In 2007, I decided to run for state senate for the 2008 race because, again, like I mentioned, I wanted the state to take a different course. Respect New York City more, trying to get more out of the state than the city already gets. I am a father of two in the public school system. My two daughters are in the public school system. Married to the former Dawn Pericelli of Glendale, who currently works for Avon Corporation. My favorite color is blue. I'm a Taurus. Anything else, sir? That's good? Okay, thank you.